Yes, hello.
We do. Thank you. Rabbi Steigmann has been the rabbi of two synagogues, one community Jewish day school and one Jewish camp. And most recently, he founded his nonprofit organization, Own Your Judaism, and serves as its director. And he is here to learn another half hour's worth of Mishnah with us. Thank you, Rabbi Steigmann. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to, excuse me, thank you to everyone who is joining from near and far. I was scrolling through the participant lists a little bit earlier, and hello to Gevert Friedman, who was one of my middle school teachers way back. Sarah Ann Friedman, who's on this list, taught me in middle school. So it's good to see you once again. And thank you all again for being here. Rachel, am I able to share my screen, or would you like me to send you a link so you can share it? What's better for you?
Let me see if I can make you a co-host so you can share on your own. Did that succeed?
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, it did. Okay, great. Thank you.
Would you please
All right,
also
so what
put
I'd
a
like to
link
do,
to your source sheet in the notes if you're able to?
sure, I'm happy to do that. Let me go grab that as well. So again, thank you to everyone who is here. What we're going to do today is study one Mishnah from Pirkei Avot, and I love this Mishnah because it helps situate and place us in a heightened emotional state. And for the past year, I would say anyone and everyone who is Jewish and or Jewish adjacent and or connected with Israel has certainly been in multiple heightened emotional states. And I think this really helps remind us of some of the things that are within our capacity to do when we're in such a state, and also some of the things that are beyond our capacity to do. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time really on this Mishnah. Rachel, were you going to jump in and say something too? Okay, great. Chrome tab. Okay, here we go. Oh, and please, by the way, if you have things that you want to add in the chat, please feel free to add them into the chat. I can't promise I'll be able to read through and scroll through every single comment that comes up, but please do feel free to scroll through in the chat, and we'll try to take a break from time to time. Pirkei Avot, chapter 423, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, "Do not try to appease your friend during their hour of anger." That was number one. Number two, nor comfort them at the hour while their dead still lies before them. That was the second thing he said. Nor question them at the hour of their vow. That is the third thing. And number four, nor strive to see them in the hour of disgrace. I think the idea that we have 5 or 7 different stages of grief and that those are linear stages, I think that idea has been debunked. It's not the case that you go to stage 1, then stage 2, then stage 3, then stage 4. That's certainly not what we do. And even with these stages not happening in a linear fashion, we certainly go through multiple emotions during grief and pain. And I think these are at least some of the emotions that we have gone through. Do not try to appease your friend during their hour of anger. I don't know what many of our first emotion was after October 7th. And I imagine that for many of us, at some point, anger was one of those emotions that welled up within us. Do not try to appease your friend during their hour of anger. And this is such a powerful line and such a powerful teaching. We know that when someone is angry, certainly when we're in any emotional state, we're not usually acting purposefully and thoughtfully and mindfully. And certainly when someone is angry, the idea of trying to say, hey, calm down, How often does that work? You're having a fight with a friend, you're having a fight with a loved one, you're having a fight with a coworker, with a boss, with a person at the checkout counter. As soon as you say calm down, all that does is escalate things. And I'm sure that many of us still find ourselves in a place of anger. And in many ways, when we're in this cycle of anger, when we're in this place of anger, the last thing that we want to do actually is calm down. Because we're in such a state, we have such this raw, pure emotion. We need to find an outlet. We need to have a way for it to vent. And so the first line here is do not try to appease someone in their time of anger. While we're still angry, simply being told to calm down doesn't necessarily work. And that's our first point of awareness of who and of what we're engaging with in these emotions after October 7th and in the full year that has passed. And again, I'm not quite able to scroll through all of the comments all of the time, but I see that someone here is saying that Dove, you're adding that you've at least experienced anger many times in the past year, and thank you for sharing that. And Renee, Renee, it's good to see you again. Renee is sharing that one of her pet peeves is when someone says relax. Obviously, if we're in an angered state, relaxed isn't where we are. It's really just a disjointed response to where we are. The second of the fourth lines in this Mishnah is also do not try to comfort someone at the hour while their dead still lies before them. And in many ways, this is probably the one that's the most counterintuitive. When someone has passed away, the first thing that we want to do is offer them comfort. And of course we do. We're people, we care, we love, and when we see someone is grieving, and perhaps at one of the deepest hours of their grief, our natural instinct right away is to go and offer them comfort. And at first blush, what do you mean do not give someone comfort at the hour while their dead still lies before them? We know that in the first few moments of loss, shock, disbelief, these are often the dominant emotions and the dominant feelings, right? Denial. What am I supposed to do right now? I don't even know what to do with this. I don't know where to go. What are you giving me comfort for? What am I supposed to do right now? I remember the first time that I had this lesson taught to me. It was in my first pulpit after I graduated from rabbinical school. My first pulpit was up in Westchester, and I was the assistant rabbi of a 550 family and unit congregation. And I remember I had said to my senior rabbi, Rabbi Jeff Siegelman, who is remarkable in so many ways, that I had done many life cycle events up until then throughout rabbinical school. The one that I had never done is a funeral. So he said, no problem. Shadow me as often as you want for funerals. And he was kind of guiding and coaching me through how do you do a funeral. And he said, Moish, when you first meet a family after a loved one has passed, what do you do? And I said, I comfort them. I hug them. I cry with them. And he said, no, you have all of Shiva to do with that if you want, but you're their rabbi. The first thing that you need to do is help get them from this immediate moment of loss to the funeral. They have to figure out how to get themselves to the funeral. They're in such disarray. After the funeral, during Shiva, then you can comfort, then you can loss, then you can cry. They have people to do that with them now. You have to get them to the funeral. What he was really saying is as soon as someone has experienced deep pain and deep loss, they're going to collapse. They don't know what to do themselves. We need to be there to help hold them up just a little bit, right? People don't know what to do in deep loss and in deep pain. What we need to do is help them stand up, help them physically, emotionally, spiritually just be in the present with what's going on. The time for mourning, the time for grieving, the time for processing, the time for trying to make any kind of sense of everything, that's going to come. I see one of the comments. I'm not quite sure what the name is. I don't know if it's Jen or Jenny. Says that in your chaplaincy training, you were told that not to offer issues, and I have that same struggle as you do, right? I have that same struggle because that's the first thing I want to do. You're crying. I want to give you a tissue. You're in mourning, and I want to give you a hug. How do I help you stand up? How do I make sure you put food in your mouth? How do I make sure you get some impossible semblance of a little bit of sleep during this incredible time of pain? How do I help you do just that basic self-care so that you then have capacity to deal with the pain and the trauma in a much more acute way? That's the second teaching. And again, that's probably the hardest one for me because it really is so jarring and it's so counterintuitive to what we would normally want to do as a loving and caring human being. The third is nor question them at the time, at the hour of their vow. This is actually incredibly poignant with Yom Kippur coming up in just a few days. Nor question them at the hour of their vow. We are in 4.5 days, or a little over 4 days, we're about to recite Kol Nidre, right? Kol Nidre, all of the vows. And we're actually asking for all of our unfulfilled vows to be annulled. This is the idea right at the Kol Nidre service. We have made promises, we've made commitments over the year that has passed, and we should celebrate the ones that we fulfilled. Even if it's just one, and even if it's the smallest of our vows, we really should celebrate that. Right? Because it's not hard. It's always hard following through with anything. That being said, we've made commitments to ourselves, to others, to God. We've made commitments over the past year that we haven't been able to follow through on. And the idea with Kol Nidre is by being able to effectively, retroactively annul these vows, we can now come with that proverbial clean slate to approach God for in our final hour of teshuvah, our final hour of atonement. Okay? So this is a particularly poignant line with Yom Kippur coming up. But now let's make it a little bit more personal. We do not question someone at the hour of their vow. The moment that we make a vow, and certainly if it's coming from a place of pain, once again, we're not thinking mindfully. We're not acting purposefully, right? Someone does something mean to me. One of the human instincts is, I'm going to get you back, right? You smack me, I'm going to get you back. You steal $20 from me, I'm going to get revenge, and I'm going to steal $20 from you. Right? These are all forms of a vow. You've hurt me, I'm going to hurt you in return. And we cast our attention back to a verse from the Torah, which, by the way, I think we misinterpret if we misinterpret it this way. But most literally, the verse says an eye for an eye. And by the way, I don't think the Torah means that literally. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But on its most basic level, this is our human instinct. You knock my tooth out, I'm going to knock your tooth out. This is a vow. It rarely comes from a place of health. It rarely comes from a place of understanding. It rarely comes from a place of what do I do with this pain that I'm feeling? Instead, rather than me engaging with my pain and how I can deal with it, I'm going to cause you pain. This is where so many of our anger vows come from? And if we're being honest with ourselves, in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, 2023, and throughout the 12 months, how many of us have had thoughts of retribution? That's not saying we want to act on them. That's not saying we're going to advocate for them, but at our most raw emotions and when we're feeling the most pain and the most hurt or anger, when we're talking to family, friends, or loved ones who still are in Israel or who are displaced from their homes, anywhere in the entire Middle East, when we watch the videos that we watch, when we see the posts that embody our pain, and when we see the posts that seem to be malicious and hateful, hurtful, and celebratory of the events of October 7th, how many of us at some point in the past 12 months can raise our hands and say, never once have I thought about retribution? Of course we have. That's a raw human emotion. And during those time of our vows, if someone comes up to me and says, Rabbi Steigmann, is that really what you want to do? The odds of me saying, oh, thank you so much for help bringing me to the present, the odds of me saying that are very, very low. Rather, I'm going to say, you're gosh darn right, that's what I want to do. Not only that, I want to do more. Right? We're still talking from such a place of pain and hurt. And as I said at the beginning, when we're responding from a place of anger and from pain, we're very rarely, it's nearly impossible to do it mindfully and thoughtfully and purposefully. I'm sharing all of this. I know we have one more line to go to, and I'm purposefully taking a brief break here. I'm sharing all of this because when we talk about mourning, when we mourn the loss of a parent, according to our tradition, we do it for a year. Not that after a year we're no longer sad. Not that after a year we no longer miss our parents. Rather, the idea is it takes up to a full year for us both to honor our parents, but also for us to really start getting a handle on that loss in a purposeful and mindful way. We're a year after October 7th. I think it's fair to say that many of us still don't have a handle, don't have a way fully to process what happened a year ago. That some of those emotions that came up for the first time 12 months ago are still so present and still so raw. I think we'd love to be in a healthier place, trying to engage with and trying to deal with our own emotions and our own responses and our own reactions. And for many of us, that's not the case. And when we hear people say, calm down, relax, get a grip, how come you haven't moved past it? The simple, raw, honest answer is I don't yet know how. I'm still in that place of loss, of anger, of grief. And some cases in retribution. Right? I'm still there. And then we get to the fourth one, which in many ways is going to be the hardest one for us to hold when we're in these places of grief and anger and vengeance. This is going to be, in some ways, the hardest one for us to really hold forth, given where we are, which is, nor strive to see them in the hour of their disgrace. Because in those moments when we are feeling anger and loss and retribution, we want to see those who did this to us disgraced. We simply do. And we want to see people on social media who are calling for the annihilation of Israel, who are spewing purposeful anti-Semitic comments and chants. We want to see them disgraced. At our lowest moments, And sometimes even in our not so low moments, we want to see them disgraced. Not that that's what we should want. That's something we still want. We know from the Seder. We know from the Seder that we do not rejoice at the downfall of our enemies. We know it. We know it in our head that we do not rejoice at the downfall of our enemies. That's why we take the grape juice or the wine out of our Kiddush cups, because it's a symbol of joy. We want to diminish our joy because the Egyptians had to suffer for us to be free. We know this from the story that we often share around Rosh Hashanah and the high holidays, the story from Masechet Brachot, the story from the Talmud about Rabbi Meir and the bandits and his wise wife Bruria, because Rabbi Meir would pray for their death, and Rabbi Bruria said, Meir, you got it wrong. You shouldn't pray for their death. Rather, you should pray for the death of their sins and their sinful ways. We don't rejoice at the downfall of our enemies. We do not want to see them disgraced. Rather, we want their behavior to change. That's what we're really hoping for. Because a person who is disgraced, if we strive for them to be disgraced, at some point that person is going to come back and do the same thing again. This is the whole difficult, powerful lesson of teshuvah, of returning, of repentance, of trying to change our ways. I picked this Mishnah because in many ways this Mishnah is telling us that one of our stages of responses is silence, of presence, of being there with and for people. And whenever I think about that, I think of a teaching of the Kutzker Rebbe. The Kutzker Rebbe asked, what are responses to grief? The first response, the first rung, and he talked about like rungs on a ladder. The first rung on a ladder is wailing and mourning. I think many of us are still in that place. The second response is silence, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And the third response is laughter. In some ways, that's the nonsensical, ludicrous response. The wailing and mourning part makes sense. Like that's self-evident that in the face of tragedy, we often, our initial response is to mourn, is to wail and to mourn. Excuse me a moment. Then we get to silence. Vayidom Aharon, and Aaron was silent after the death of his two sons. We're starting to process. We're starting to be there with and for each other. We're not trying to say relax. We're not trying to give a platitude, everything is going to be okay. We're understanding that this is the reality from a year ago and over the past year. We need to be in a place where somehow we can accept that this is how things are right now. Because until we accept that this is how things are, we are not going to be in a place that we can be helpful and healthy, moving things forward. If we're still in the place of wailing and crying out, we're not going to be making mindful decisions about how to move forward collectively and together. And so next we need to move to a place of silence. This is our painful present. And then finally, the Kutzker Rebbe says the response to mourning, to grief, is laughter. It's astounding. What do you mean laugh? Right? How are you supposed to laugh in the face of tragedy? Right? I don't think he means laughter in the sense of denial. I think part of it is he's calling back to a time, to a section from the Talmud, from Brachot, where essentially there's a story where the rabbis and Rabbi Yehoshua in particular, and I think maybe it was Ruby was just talking about a story about Rabban Gamliel and also Rabbi Yehoshua. I got here late. I think he was talking about the story of the two of them. The same Rabbi Yehoshua, essentially, when God was intervening in an argument, said to God, God, you have no place in this argument because you gave us the Torah to interpret, right? Essentially, it was the most polite butt out in the history of Judaism. And Rabbi Yehoshua said that to God. And according to Rabbi Akiva, at that moment, according to Eliyahu Hanavi, at that moment, God laughed, right? My children have defeated me, God said. There's a playfulness to that. I think when the Kutzker Rebbe says that our third rung is laughter, there's something hopeful. There's something aspirational. May we get to a place of laughter yet again. In fact, the rabbis say that days of mourning ultimately should be turned into days of celebration. That days of fasting, not Yom Kippur, but the minor fast that we have at Tisha B'Av, that days of fasting should ultimately be turned into days of rejoicing. I think that is the hope and bracha. I can understand that some of us, if not many of us, if not most of us, might not be in a place right now where we can anticipate laughing yet again. Some of us might be in a place where we are urgently, desperately hoping for a little bit of laughter. And I'd like to invoke the teaching of the Kutzker Rebbe here, that there's a point at which we do need to laugh again. We do need to enjoy again. We do need to celebrate again. And that does not mean that we are no longer in mourning. It does not mean that we are no longer grieving. Hopefully, it means that by being in that place, we are also accessing our full true capacity for health and healing, truly making ourselves the best partners in peace that we can be, because we're not the best partners for peace when we're still angry. Making ourselves the best partners for peace and helping to do our part to bring peace, not just to Israel and not just to the Middle East, but really to the whole world. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your comments. I know that I wasn't able to get to most of them. If you do want to reach out, feel free to reach out to me at any time by email. And with Yom Kippur coming up, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And thank you for the opportunity, Rachel, to join.
Thank you, Rabbi Steigmann. Thank you to all of you for participating in this day of learning and remembering. We are going to take a short break now. We are on pause for lunch, but if you would like to join us, we also, this is a regular feature at My Jewish Learning at 12:15 on Mondays. We have a program we call Misha Berach Moment, where we gather and think of those who are in need of healing and say a prayer. So you are all cordially invited to join us for that at 12:15. That is a separate Zoom room. So I'm going to put that information in the chat right now. I apologize, typing and speaking is still a challenge for me. So again, we are pausing now for a lunch break, at least for those on the on this coast. In any case, we will be back in 1 hour with another series of half-hour Mishnah classes as we continue to remember and mourn and pray together on October 7th, 2024. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you again soon.